Hello, and let's get started. Welcome, everyone. NetElixir is kicking off the holiday season, which is such an important time for retailers with our 2022 Holiday E-commerce Forecast webinar. We have a packed and insightful agenda today where we will cover all things to get you ready for this holiday season and leaving you with resources for your 2022 holiday success. I would like to kindly ask you to fill out a quick survey that will populate at the end of this webinar. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could, as it helps us enhance these events and give you the best experience. Please also feel free to send us your questions in the chat box, and we'll do our best to have them answered at the end of this session. And let's jump into talking more about NetElixir. At NetElixir, we help e-commerce brands find and engage high-value customers and acquire game-changing insights. I'm excited to highlight the solutions that we offer, as well as our partnerships with UPS, Google, Microsoft, and Meta. We've had the privilege of working with great clients such as Amica, Swell, Lenovo, and Ashley Stewart. With over 18 years of digital marketing experience and 13 years of international search marketing experience, we've helped over 600 e-commerce brands build their success stories and launched our very own AI-powered marketing platform, NetElixir Insights. I'm also proud to mention our membership of the Google Leadership Council. And it's time to introduce our speaker for today, founder and CEO of NetElixir, Udain Bose. Udain is an innovation fellow at the Columbia Business School and spreads his knowledge by being a guest lecturer at Cornell, Baruch, and the Indian School of Business. Udain, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the 14th annual holiday forecast webinar. This is one of our most anticipated events or webinars that we conduct in the year. And every year seems to be interesting, but this year, as we were working on the holiday forecast, it specially assumed a different level of excitement as well as interest, just given the things that really have been happening over the last few months, which has really created a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unpredictability, and a lot of volatility in the markets as well. So before I even get started, I really wanted to thank the NetElixir Retail Intelligence Lab and all the team members who really have made this research happen. And they have been crunching numbers on about 80 of our mid-size and large customers. And what I'm going to present to you essentially is a result of the work that they have done. We fundamentally try to answer three questions in this webinar. The first part is we have seen a pretty slow first half of this year. Things started bouncing back a little in Q3, but the question that everyone is asking is, will the 2022 holiday season see a substantial bounce back in online sales? The second question is obvious. How should businesses prepare for holiday success this year? And last but not the least, can NetElixir share with us some marketing resources that can be used by retail marketers to effectively market during the holiday season? I'll start with sharing some of the trends and insights. These are high-level trends and insights. And I'll start with this graphic, which I am pretty sure many of you would be very familiar with. So this graphic came out in, I believe, in the month of July or August, if I'm not wrong, 2020. And this showed the impact which COVID has had in terms of online sales. And there was this statement that we may have actually crossed 10 years of growth in 3 months. Now, one of the things which definitely happened during this time, we saw a tremendous number of brand new first-time online shoppers come into the fray, and they still continue to contribute to a substantial chunk of the overall revenues. But having said that, I think I really wanted to take some of the LinkedIn messages which were shared by two of my very good friends, Andrew Lipsman of eMarketer and Ajit Sivdasan, who heads Lenovo DTC. Andrew talks about the myth of permanent e-commerce acceleration, while Ajit talks about, let us not panic yet, the post-COVID normal, and let us try to sort of comp versus 2019. So understandably, there was not, I mean, at the end of it, we didn't really have 10 years of growth in 10 weeks. It seemed to be a gross distortion. What was actually the number? So when we really sort of dived deep and our analysts found out, some of these trends essentially pointed to that. But before I jump into answering that question, let me share with you some of these trends that we have observed. One, we saw mobile phones driving about 56% of all online orders. It fell a little bit compared to last year when the percentage was 58%. For both fashion and beauty categories, mobile drives an inordinate percentage of orders as such. When compared to H1 2019, and this is an interesting one, because there is a lot of discussion in terms of comping the numbers versus 2019, we saw that the average website traffic is 21% higher. Website orders are at least 12% higher. Website AOV is 24% higher, though there is an inflationary component there. So based on all of these metrics, we can safely say that the pandemic led to not 10 years, but anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5 years of e-commerce growth within 1 year, and which is quite substantial as well. It's almost like a 2-year leap forward that really happened during the pandemic. The third trend, which was quite prominent, was most retailers, to adjust to the shift in consumer demand, they have made some drastic changes to their product mix. And hat tip to all of you retailers and e-commerce companies out here who were able to make that change, because that required a tremendous amount of agility, that requires a tremendous amount of planning, and that requires, I must say, a tremendous amount of boldness as well to really make those shifts happen. And it's never really easy to move to that direction. The fourth component, I mean, when we really analyze the first 6 months, or in this case, we have analyzed about the first 8 months, it's very clear that the high purchase frequency categories have continued to do well online, more or less. For example, beauty was definitely a winner in this, in the first about 8 months. Apparel didn't do badly as well. We saw grocery as well do fairly well. On the other hand, some of the non-essential categories, let us say consumer electronics, home improvement, hardware and tools, home furnishings, they didn't really do as well in the first about 7 to 8 months, which probably makes me think that maybe there is some amount of substitution really which is happening as well. When I say substitution, I'm talking about a concept where everyone has a certain finite amount of budget. Because of the inflationary pressures, understandably, the amount that you could purchase for that budget, that capacity sort of went down. And understandably, the essentials assumed more importance when it comes to making those purchases at the cost of the so-called the non-essentials as such. So one question which a lot of our clients who are in the non-essential segment have asked me is, are we likely to see a bit of a bounce back during the holiday season of the categories like home decor or home furnishings, home improvement, or consumer electronics and so on. So I should be able to touch a little bit based on the data which has been shared by our Retail Intelligence Lab with you as well. The last but not the least is BNPL may really have been one of the most prominent catalysts for online sales during the last couple of years. Now, I know the overall verdict whether BNPL is good or not as good is fairly open, primarily because understandably during the inflationary pressures, the prices sort of going up, BNPL definitely sort of rode that particular or is still riding that inflationary wave. The question is it going to last very long? But whatever it is, it's very, very clear that BNPL has been a stimulus in the first 6 to 8 months in terms of driving additional online sales. One of the points I really wanted to mention, I don't want to make any connections here because there are at least a couple of attendees today who work with BNPL companies. The question is, if you really observe the return rates as well, last year versus this year, the return rate has gone up on an average from about 14-15% to as much as about 22 to 24%. In categories like apparel, it has gone up to as much as about 42%. While there is no very clear correlation, but may that some of that increase be also getting driven by BNPL, which has really catalyzed this growth as well. From there, I really move on to some of the key channel trends. The first trend I wanted to highlight is understandably the continued importance or the increase in importance of retail media and marketplaces. Based on the YTD August trends, we believe the retail media plus marketplaces sales during holiday season may account for almost up to about 60% of total online holiday sales. That means direct to consumer sites accounting for about 40% and 60% coming from retail media and marketplaces. That is substantial. That is substantial by each and every means that you really sort of compare. And with the speed at which it has been growing, The question is, what is that ideal mix? We should be probably sort of addressing that as well in a more model-driven way. But one of the points which I really wanted to highlight here. The second pointer on this slide is the adoption or the increasing adoption as well as reliance on AI-driven modules by Google, Microsoft Ads, or Meta. That really has provided very clear indications that the future may be AI-driven. For example, we all, I'm pretty sure those of us who are doing Google advertising would all be very familiar with Performance Max, which was introduced by Google beginning of this year. Understandably, the overall, there have been challenges as companies have really adopted Performance Max in terms of optimizing performance and growing performance. But more importantly, it has been a massive paradigm shift. A paradigm shift where every part of Google Ads was controllable. Suddenly, it is not as much. But there are other variables like the quality of audience inputs, et cetera, which can be controlled. But that level of constant granularity in terms of the elements that you can control probably is not really available any longer. So we firmly believe that the future is going to be very AI-driven when it comes to paid media advertising. The third trend I wanted to highlight is I think every business and every channel is trying to understand how the digital marketing landscape will change with the demise of the third-party cookie sometime in 2024. It was earlier supposed to be 2023 on Chrome, then it sort of got pushed to 2024. And that's something which everybody is sort of struggling to understand and comprehend. We have this theory that it may sort of lead to the possible creation of walled gardens, where it can be one Google funnel or one Amazon funnel probably already exists and so on and so forth. Retail media, again, is very clearly playing onto that particular trend. Last but not the least, I think TikTok has definitely been a winner in the last 2 years or 2 to 3 years now. And we are still struggling to see any very clear indication that both Instagram / Facebook or Meta and Google's offering with the YouTube Shorts can pose some sort of a deterrent for the explosive growth of TikTok, which is sort of happening. I'll sort of next share with you some of the overall trends. And these trends, there is obviously, for these trends are more generic. It is through the conversations, through just an acute observation of the economic parameters, an understanding of the overall consumer behavior shifts, talking to many very senior executives, which have really sort of gotten me to share these 3 trends. I call them the pandemic effect because they may not really relate entirely almost immediately to online shopping, or probably they do. But I think it will be helpful for as marketers or as someone who's in any business to keep in mind. The first trend is obviously the trend of the creator economy. I mean, nothing new, but very clearly, specifically, we are seeing in Gen Z, the widespread increase in the need for self-expression. Let me repeat that. That's a very important part for you to know, the need for self-expression. I need to share my story. And that's where I think TikTok is the preferred channel or the chosen channel. It's very clear that stories have moved from just being stories to being empathy engines. And that's a very important statement that I am making there, primarily because this is what is essentially the aggregated stories are shaping the future. The question is, as the aggregated stories, their reach sort of increases, what does it mean, or is it really having any impact in areas or channels where you would probably not think so obviously? For example, is NetElixir's challenges to an extent caused by TikTok and the aggregated social media stories which are getting shared? Who knows? We believe yes. The second component is through a lot of conversations that I have been having with C-level executives, primarily in the retail, direct-to-consumer, CPG categories, and so on. And this was a very interesting comment from the chief customer officer of a Fortune 500 CPG giant, probably a Fortune 200 CPG giant. He mentioned something which is very interesting. He said that pre-pandemic, 20% of my time was spent in solving unique problems that I never really faced earlier. And 80% was plain regular stuff. So it was easy, right? 20% solving problems which I had never really solved earlier, but 80% was regular stuff. This year, I feel that has increased to that 20% has increased to almost 100%. To say the very least, it's really exhausting. I never really feel that I am in control. it was a very telling statement. I have really spent a lot of time thinking about that seemingly innocuous line, primarily because that is the sort of pressure and stress I believe every executive in any company or any business leader is struggling with today. And in this environment where there is a tremendous amount of business volatility, many are trying to deal with this or cope with this by just slowing down their decision process and risk taking. The question that I asked that gentleman as well, is it likely to have an impact on the progress that we make? As a business, as overall an aggregation of businesses. And also, I really wanted to call out something. I was doing a presentation in the SendLane forum 2 days back. I mentioned, someone asked me as to what is the new normal. It is my personal opinion that there will never be a new normal as such. It will be a new beginning altogether. It's almost like day one. Maybe the first day, the Jan 1 of 2022 was day one of what probably will be a trend of volatility or probably a little bit of a turbulence in terms of the overall economic environment, maybe in 2022, and even it may stretch to some parts of 2023 as well. So I think let us not brand or compare anything with 2019 or 2020, because it's totally different. And the overall business environment has changed. And that is really causing a tremendous amount of stress and a little bit of a confusion as well in all the business leaders, as I mentioned. Last but not the least, I think there are new work schedules have been written, right? So we saw that, again, the hybrid module, people sort of slowly getting back to work this year. Now, with that, we believe that the new work schedules are really altering the consumer behavior as well. Satya Nadella has proposed this concept of a triple peak work day. So he says that since you are always working from the time that you sort of wake up till the time you go to sleep, there is very clearly an emergence of a triple peak, right? So a very, very productive and very active activity-packed morning. And then there is a slump, and then again sort of goes up probably around a little after maybe 2 p.m. or 3 p.m., goes down by about 5-ish, 6-ish, and again goes back up probably at about before you go to sleep, right? So in this triple play work day or triple peak work day, I'm sorry, understandably, the entire search, shop, buy process. When I say search, I'm not really limiting it only to Google search or let us say search engines. I'm talking about research as a process, right? So when you sort of buy something which has a higher involvement level, understandably, there is a lot of research which sort of goes, pre-purchase research which goes in. So research, shop, and buy process, that literally has become 24/7 now. And in that landscape, the question is, how should marketers think about concepts which we have all been brought up in? Concepts like day parting. What happens to day parting? It probably just sort of just goes out of the window. I mean, there is no concept of day parting. If day parting is not there, how do we really even anticipate as to what are those triple peak work days? And when is the consumer likely to make a purchase? The unfortunate answer, and this I'm talking because we collect a lot of data that I'll share with you in the next couple of slides. We have seen that there is a fair amount of still, and I'll use the word with a bit of a caution because a lot of my analyst friends are joining today. There is a fair amount of randomness still which exists. I don't think it's right or fair to jump onto any conclusion that we know exactly that apparel shoppers really shop at this time and buy at this time and so on. We have not been able to see that correlation as such. And it's tricky primarily because if your workday has suddenly extended to literally a 24/7 or whatever, 18/7, then you really have to constantly be on the go and understand the importance concept of being agile, identifying those trends literally on a real-time basis, and really have a plan to act on those trends as well. So we are very clearly a proponent of what is called an agile, almost like a 24/7 marketing, to really understand, stay on top of these trends and maximize that part. Understandably, goes without saying, no marketer, no company in the world probably can really afford to continue with the same overall business operations or marketing operations to really feed to that sort of a demand and search, shop, buy behavior. In that case, is it time for us to rethink marketing operations? So those are the 3 points I wanted to really present to you. The first one has a clear impact in terms of how you really build and deliver and share content, how you connect with people, engage people, how you engage in what I call responsible marketing. The second one is the business reality. I think the volatile business environment, unfortunately, will probably continue for some more time, and that will create additional pressure. But if there was one thing that I'm very clear and very confident about, that businesses should not do, they should not stop making those decisions or delaying those decisions, because that probably can really hinder or impede the progress. The last but not the least, with the consumer behavior becoming always on, as marketers, we really need to rethink our overall marketing operations, primarily because understandably, engaging consumers, and that too multi-generational consumers, may not be as simple as it was probably just before the pandemic. Let me, and feel free to put any questions on the chat box or the Q&A box. We'll be happy to take those questions at the end of it. I'll end this first part with 3 questions, which the holiday retailers have been asking the NetElixir team. The first question is, we have all heard about inventory levels being high. And very clearly, I think the inventory levels are anywhere between 5 months to 18 months, depending on the category, the business we are talking about, et cetera, et cetera. Even, for example, Target, Walmart, they are carrying a huge amount of inventory. So the question that everyone is asking is, are large retailers like Walmart, Target, or Amazon likely to plan a second Prime Day in October, maybe around mid of October, to lower their inventory levels? And will this directly seamlessly blend into an early holiday shopping spike and the holiday promotion starting earlier than before? The second question, with most retailers, they are still trying to catch up on their overall annual goals, right? Sales goals or retail sales goals. Now, they have to liquidate the inventory as well. At the same time, they really have to promote the holiday, the holiday goods as well. So understandably, there is a lot of question in everyone's mind, how much of an incremental competition would we experience during the holiday season? And how should we really, as maybe a mid-sized business or an SMB or any business, a large business, prepare for this competition? The last but not the least, I think very clear, and I am very sure everyone is very aware of this, but with very stubbornly high inflation numbers. I mean, the CPI basically didn't move this month when it was declared just day before yesterday. As the Fed keeps increasing interest rate, now they are talking about increasing by about 0.75 to 1%. That's a massive rate increase, which is likely to happen next week, right? And in fact, there is this polling center where about 1/3 of the people, or more than 1/3 of the people, that believe that the Fed may actually increase up to 1% in terms of interest rate. So understandably, the consumer demand is going to, at some point in time, relent. The question and the concern that a lot of businesses have, is it likely to happen during the holiday season? And that's understandably a massive concern, because if suddenly that drop happens before the holiday season, what happens to the overall holiday sales? And how do we really even prepare for that? So those are the 3 questions that we get asked many times by our clients. I'll now get into the key part of our webinar, which is trying to present to you the holiday e-commerce forecast. But before I sort of dive in, let me explain to you the basis of the forecast. And as I mentioned, this is our 14th holiday forecast. We have been conducting this ongoing analysis of e-commerce and search engine marketing metrics for our customers. Mid-size and large customers' estimated online revenue during holiday season is about $700 million, a little less than $1 billion. And when we say holiday in normal conventional terms, we talk about November 1 to December 25. These businesses that we have really included in the data set, combined, they account for about a little over half a billion unique website visits across key holiday retail categories, electronics, apparel, and so on. And we have been aggregating this data for 14 years now. This would actually be our 14th holiday forecast. Some of the methods that we have used, and that methods have had to evolve as well. We use week-wise website visits, sales, channel-wise investments, and so on and so forth. Based on these primary variables, we sort of build a secondary set of metrics and so on, calculated metrics and so on. We have broken this data down into mobile and desktop, and it's just fascinating to see. I mean, the mobile percentage just about 5 years back was much lower than the desktop, and now, as you have seen, it's substantially higher compared to the desktop. We separately analyze the key YTD metrics for the year as well, and compared the same for the previous 2 years. For this year, we have additionally considered the 2019 holiday sales data, because there has been a lot of discussion, should be really comp versus 2019. I've shared with you some of the numbers, which shows that we probably should not. Our forecasting model has significant weightage on back to school. Now, this also has really had to go through an alteration. It used to be more than 20%, but in the light of the last 2 COVID years, where back to school sales were inadequate predictors, we had to really reduce the overall percentage weightage. And last but not the least, we had to really consider the fact that there was a substantial COVID impact in 2020 and 2021 as well. Because 2021, if you remember, I think around the Black Friday weekend, we saw the spike in overall Omicron sales as well happening. So December sales were substantially impacted by Omicron as well. So with all of this in mind, I think at the same time, the prevailing consumer sentiment, the past data, the recent data trends as well, our model predicts a 7% year-on-year growth this holiday season. Now, this definitely is much more optimistic and higher compared to what we have seen in the first 8 months of this year. And I'll explain some of the reasons as to why we are going with a higher than what we have seen, in fact, significantly higher than what we have seen in the first 8 months of this year. 3 macro factors which we believe will drive 7% e-commerce growth. It can be 7 to 8%. I would think more likely towards 7% e-commerce revenue growth this holiday season. The optimist in us believes that holidays may just be that time, that sliver, that overall narrow time period when the inflation gets pushed down to sub 7%, leading to a stronger sentiment, consumer sentiment, and before the consumer demand suddenly starts to slump. And there is a reason for that. If you really look at the non-essential categories, and we really analyze the non-essential categories using the overall government retail sales data, you would see very interesting trend each and every month. The August numbers are going to be released tomorrow, so it's not out yet. Each and every month, Jan to July, every month, the non-essential categories have experienced a year-on-year decline every month. Right? So we believe that the holiday season, we will, and understandably, one, if people are buying lesser, but at the same time, that also can create, in our opinion, some amount of pent-up demand as well. The second part, when you really look at the third component, this would be the first real post-pandemic holiday season. As I mentioned, we got sort of hit by Omicron in the month of December last year. We believe people want to have happy, that self-expression, which I talked about earlier, that is something that will sort of happen now. Also, people really want to give good gifts to their loved ones. And we would see that narrow sliver, that time period, probably, and we believe it can be the holiday season, will provide that opportunity for these non-essential category sales to also go up. So that's our optimistic forecast in terms as to what may happen. We may just sort of catch that time when it's the inflation is driven down with the increase in interest rate to sub 7%, and the consumer demand has not really collapsed yet. There is a gap between that. And that may exactly coincide with the holiday season. The final point in this one is an earlier than normal start to the holiday shopping season as well. As I mentioned, I mean, the inventory liquidation is one part, September, October, but also it may blend into seamlessly the holiday deals, which are expected to start right at the beginning of November, right? So that would be an earlier start because understandably, it would be a very competitive holiday season, and businesses would really sort of go all out to really compete. And the time is the most important dimension in which you can really compete. So effectively, these are, I think, 3 macro factors which we believe will be an important driver. I also wanted to share with you some of the trends and data points that our research lab has really shared with me. The first one, it's very interesting. The first 7 or 8 months of the year, even though the revenue has not really gone up, but the number of units per order has remained constant, even though the number of orders has declined compared to in online for many categories, or most categories, in fact. Right? But the number of items per order has, so basket size in terms of number of units has remained constant. We believe this is a positive expression of demand. And the basket size remaining constant, but not as many baskets are getting purchased, right? So and again, kudos to all the businesses who are there on this call to really be able to juggle around their product mix, to understand the consumer demand, the consumer behavior, and really sort of categorize and really create that mix accordingly. The second part is a very interesting part. Now, we have captured all this data using that AI-powered technology that Sana talked about called Elixir Insights. We are able to exactly and precisely track what is the time gap or time duration and how many times the clicks happen between the first time a visitor lands on a website to the time they make the first purchase. And that's important because that shows as to what is the propensity of making a purchase. And we are able to track exactly that using Elixir Insights. We see that shoppers, when we really compare in Q3, that latency number, the first purchase latency number fell by 11%. So people completed their first purchase from the time they sort of landed on the website, 11% quicker compared to the time that they were taking in Q2 2022. And even more important is the latency number of Q3, very interestingly, is almost the same as Q3 2021, which was a pretty strong Q3, as we all know. So something, a very, very positive trend. I really wanted to, really wanted to call that out. The third one, I think, is interesting. I mean, as a part of this research, the Retail Intelligence Lab, we try to capture this weekly data on and break it down into 4 different regions, right? The Northeast, West, South, and so on. Very interestingly, we saw the year start, and roughly around April or May, we saw that normally Northeast, in terms of online sales, was trending very comparably compared to last year. So Northeast was sort of back in the positive zone, roughly end of April, beginning of May. The West Coast was, or the West zone was again at par, roughly in the month of May as well. Very encouragingly, we saw that Midwest and South also sort of got into the positive zone in the latter half of August and beginning of September as well. So very clearly, there was this, again, I sort of keep on emphasizing this important trend, specifically for those of you who really sell categories which are deemed to be non-essential. There seems to be some positive undercurrent which is happening. And it is not really localized to only Northeast or any particular zone. It is essentially spread across all the zones as well, which is an extremely important observation. And that observation is important primarily because this really calls for an overall lift in the demand across the country as well. And we believe that that is just the start, which will really continue through the holiday season as well. And that is something that you should definitely take note of. Let me move on. 2 factors which understandably are really clouding our and making the optimism more of a cautious optimism. And the first one is understandably the high inventory levels. While we know about the publicly traded company that they are trying to really offload the inventory very rapidly, and they will be sort of coming up with pretty strong deep discounts, essentially this month and beginning of next month as well. We do not have as much of a insight into the privately held companies and how quickly and what is their plan and how equipped are they in terms of reducing the demand. The inventory levels, which are pretty high. We feel that may be one of those factors which can really skew that overall holiday number. Because if you are really getting into the holiday season with still a substantial amount of inventory levels, then you may really have to think about a completely different holiday marketing plan compared to what you would otherwise. The second one is I'm a big fan, and I can really prove the correlation essentially of the UMISH's Consumer Sentiment Index. It touched an all-time low, as we know, in the month of June, and July numbers though has gone up a little bit, but 50 to 51.5 is still extremely low. I mean, historically, since the start of the index in 1978, we are still trending at the lowest number, right? So the consumer confidence we have seen very clearly is impacted by the inflation rates. And that's something which I'm very sure the Fed is very aware of that. That's the reason the interest rate constantly keep on going up. I think it's extremely important expression of what is the potential demand or the buying appetite going to be during the holiday season as well. So those are the two areas which are creating a little bit of a cautiousness in our rather optimistic forecast of 7 to 8% online sales growth during the holiday season. Let me move on to the category level holiday forecast. This becomes a little difficult and tricky because we are limiting to only certain categories for which we have customers in our data set. As I mentioned again, for those of you, I mean, these are the data set is companies with e-commerce revenue of $20 million to $500 million. They exclusively pertain to only our customers, and they will not be applicable for the entire category, or may not be applicable for the entire category as well. So that's a disclaimer that I really wanted to present. But if you really look at the first half, we saw apparel was up plus 7% year on year. Beauty was up plus 19%. Both of these segments in the July to September 8th, I mean, if you really look at July only, they were actually in minus 2%. Apparel, they sort of moved to a plus 5% because of a strong back to school showing. Actually, a much stronger than expected back to school showing. It got to about plus 5%. And we estimate that this trend, again, during holidays would increase even further and go to about plus 8%. Beauty category continues to be strong. And we believe that it will still hold at about 20 to 21% during the holiday season. Gifting has been slow, but this is what I was talking about, that people really, really want to give great gifts to their loved ones. And we will see that happening this holiday season. And that's the reason I'm forecasting a bounce back from minus 4% in the current quarter to about plus 3% during the holiday season. Home furnishings would stay more or less flat. Consumer electronics would again more or less stay flat, slightly in the positive zone. Again, the demand has been suppressed for quite some time. One is the suppression of demand, and the second part is, in my humble opinion, a lack of innovation as well. For example, we saw recent Apple updates in terms of the launches, etc. There was, honestly speaking, nothing which can be classified as innovation from that perspective. So I think that lack of innovation also is really causing a bit of a challenge in the consumer electronics category, which is facing one of those very unique times. Pet supplies, we believe, have been consistent. They sort of broke back into the positive zone this quarter. They'll continue. Hardware and tools were roughly flat this quarter so far, will move up a little bit to about plus 4%. So all of these, when we really do a weighted average, comes to about 7 to 8%. We'll say 7+% essentially during the holiday season. So that would be our forecast. I'll be happy to answer any questions, address any questions at the end of it. But and we'll be sharing the deck with all of you who are attending today's session as well. Some of the recommendations, so knowing all of this stuff, right? We have shared with you some of the pandemic effect. We have shared with you the channel trends, etc. So as we were creating those growth marketing recommendations, we struggled as to how exactly to make sense of all of this, and what are some of the things that businesses should really be prepared for with in the holiday season. And the first one was creating a holistic marketing plan. Now, understandably, if we are projecting 58 to 60% of the sales will happen through the retail media or marketplace sites, understandably, we will need to have a plan. Then the question is, what should I really promote on marketplaces versus what should I sell from my own website? And we believe this grid, which just maps your products based on the profit margin and the velocity, can be extremely helpful. And again, it goes to the individual businesses to decide in terms of what are those quadrants that you really want to promote through the marketplaces, given the fact that you are spending or paying them a substantial amount of margin amount and sacrificing the margins. And what are those products that would be uniquely and only sold from your own website. The second point I really wanted to call out is the importance of high value customers. I know we have been speaking about it a lot for the last about couple of years now. we believe when you have finite amount of marketing budget, it doesn't make sense to waste that budget chasing customers who buy from your site only once and never come back again. And I'm purposefully using the word carefully with the word called waste, primarily because we have seen when you really analyze your customer base, the high value customers may be as low as 10, 15, 20% of your total number of customers, but they are driving a bulk of your revenues through not just the first purchases, but repeat purchases as well. So why should you not spend time and invest in a technology which is able to identify high value shoppers? And that's where our Elixir Insights, the AI platform, exactly does that. The third part, which I had mentioned in one of the or probably multiple sessions earlier as well, have a plan B ready. So if you were to create a plan based on our plus 7% or plus 8% overall online sales growth, and suddenly you see that something doesn't really go per the expectation, have a plan B ready as well. Or if you are too conservative in your plan, then really allow some weightage to the projections and the forecast that we are making so that you are able to scale up quickly as well. So have a plan B ready and be nimble enough to and willing enough to really operate that plan and activate that plan as well. Now I come to this is an example as to when you really have a strong plan B, the holiday season can really be a very, very productive and a successful time for your business. I'll leave all of you with two very unique holiday resources, which we are very confident will come very handy. One of these resources called the Holiday Calendar. We have really published it since 2015 was the first one. Interestingly, my colleague Keith, when we were discussing the Holiday Calendar of 2015, when it was the first time we released it, but this has been 7-8 years now. There are only 34 days effectively in the holiday season. So we were taking this time, right? We have seen this time, I think that may actually sort of increase to as much as 49 days. So the holiday promotional time just keeps on getting longer, primarily because the consumers start their holiday shopping process a lot earlier as well. So in this thing, just to simplify as to how exactly to read this graph, we have tried to come up with the nomenclature. I'll just sort of very, very quickly go through this. I know I have overstepped the time limit already. So any of the days that are marked in green, you would say you have a decent competitive intensity. The year-on-year increase in holiday sales is greater than 7% and less than 15%. So a moderate, I would think, competitive intensity. The orange ones are where there is a moderate intensity. So increase in online sales is about 15% and less than 20%. So we're literally going day by day and how much will it be the year-on-year online sales increase. While the high competitive intensity days, the ones marked in red, the year-on-year increase in online sales is supposed to be greater than 25%. Now, those are the days that would be like intensely competitive. So if you have to really plan your overall merchandising plan or even the promotional plan, the product mix accordingly, we feel fairly confident that this calendar can be a tremendously valuable companion for you. As I mentioned, I mean, e-commerce sales, this is more optimistic, I think about 7% and so on in November and so on and so forth. So I think this is the overall basis of our projections as such. And last but not the least, you can download this calendar by using this link. And I would request Sana to ping this link on the chat box as well. It's netelixir.com/event/holiday readiness. And that can really sort of help you. We are also very, very excited to launch a retail trends prediction ebook as well for the holiday season. This has been specifically curated by our content team, and the colleagues have really done a tremendous research and are happy to really present to you this trends and research insights. Feel free to use this link again to download the book. I assure you that you will sort of find a lot of nuggets which can be really helpful as you really plan for a competitive holiday season. And last but not the least, this also, like the annual holiday forecast webinar, has become a custom for us, which is our annual event, the 9th. This is going to be the 9th edition of this X equals experience. The theme always has been rethinking innovation. we have a very intimate group of industry leaders and professors from Wharton, Cornell, Columbia, all coming over to the grounds for sculpture for 1.5 days of the Princeton experience, plus a lot of knowledge sharing, networking, etc. We'll be also live streaming this event. And I'm pretty sure that you would sort of walk away with some very tangible and exciting, inspiring takeaways from the speakers that we have. We have Katie Milkman, who supposedly the new guru in terms of influence, the category of influence. We have Jay Stainfield, who was the ex-CEO of blinds.com. And we have David Bell, a very famous professor from Wharton who runs his own private equity firm. And last but not the least, Parag Shah, Billy from Parag Shah from, he is the head of merchandise for the Giant Group. We have Billy from Google. So it's a pretty power-packed lineup. So feel free to sign up for the live casting of this event on the 30th as such. With that, I'll be happy to sort of answer or take any questions. Sana, if there were any, I mean, I see a bunch of questions coming in. So happy to address these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Thane. We did get some questions come in, so let's just get into it. So for our first one, last year's Black Friday and Cyber Monday fell short of expectations. How do you think these days will perform this year?
That's a great question. I think the entire significance of Black Friday and Cyber Monday probably may getting a little diluted. And a very controversial statement for some of you, but that's what is happening, right? And that is bound to happen as the holiday season keeps getting stretched longer. Understandably, consumers have, in most cases, a finite wallet size. And since the promotions are starting a lot earlier, in many cases, the Black Friday and Cyber Monday, for example, last year was a good example, are not really as big as they used to be. And their importance to an extent have gotten a little diluted or maybe spread out over a longer time period as such. So this year, we believe Black Friday and Cyber Monday would be a part of, I would think, 5 or 10-day time period. So you should probably think of looking at the entire thing as you can call it a Black Friday week or a Cyber Monday week, but really look at it as a continuum, which starts the Monday prior to Thanksgiving and continues on till Cyber Monday. So that's the continuum that I'm talking about. And within that time period, we feel fairly confident that the online sales will actually be still pretty strong this year.
Great. Second question that came in, are you seeing any changes in the share of marketplaces like Amazon and eBay?
Overall, I think Amazon and, I mean, there has been obviously a proliferation of marketplaces. I mean, Walmart definitely is doing extremely well. Amazon has been maintaining its continued growth as such. It has not been as explosive a growth as it used to be just a couple of years back, understandably with increasing competition, etc. But net, I think eBay has been performing extremely well. So overall, eBay's share has increased as well. I mean, understandably, their cloud aggregate as a marketplace category has gone up. So if you really, as we mentioned, that between marketplaces and retail media, we expect almost 6 out of every $10 being spent by holiday shoppers this year would be spent just in marketplaces and retail media.
And let's do one more. Is the trend of customers starting their holiday shopping early here to stay? How should retailers prepare for a longer holiday season?
That's a fantastic question. There are multiple factors which go into this thing. This year, yes, I think it'll definitely be a little longer, as I mentioned, because of the extra inventory which is getting carried. The promotions will start early, and it will really blend into or fuse into the holiday promotions as such. But moving forward, as I see that fundamentally the holiday consumer behavior may be changing also a little bit. And this may be happening because of about multiple factors. And I, honestly speaking, I think it goes beyond the scope of marketing, or I'm really very humbly accept it sort of goes much beyond my scope. But some of the factors, let me explain this. The first one, we are seeing an inordinate increase in post-Christmas purchases. And these are sort of getting spent in what we call the me buys, right? People buy from themselves. So that's specifically increasing as well. And there is some sort of a correlation with almost like the diversification, for the lack of a better word, increasing diversity and overall as the multicultural population and the consumer base in the US increases as well, right? Because for many other religions, Christmas is a holiday, but I think effectively it is not the holiday from that perspective, right? So they are pretty open to purchasing even after the Christmas period as well. The third component, which I think is also an important thing to note, effectively, I think the consumers also have been substantially induced into this by marketers who really have been trying to maximize the timeline available, right? So this is the timeline available. And that has really gotten very complicated because of the supply chain challenges that we have experienced now. For this would be the second holiday season with supply chain challenges. Last year was the inventory. We don't even know whether we'll be able to get the stock on time or not. And this year, understandably, inventory levels. So there are multiple factors working on this part. Whether it has had a fundamental shift or is big enough to cause a fundamental shift in terms of the consumer behavior, we'll sort of wait to see that, but there is a high possibility that may actually be the case. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Dane, and thanks everyone for joining. I wish you all success this holiday season. And yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Wish everyone a very happy holiday season. Thank you.